Hello, and welcome to the Be Purely Balanced podcast. I'm Dr. Crystal Couture, and today I'm here with Solala Towler. Solala was an editor and publisher of The Empty Vessel, a journal of Daoist philosophy and practice for 25 years. He's had 14 books published, including The Inner Chapters of Chuang and Tales from the Tao, and Practicing the Daodejing, 81 Steps on the Way with Sounds True. His work has been translated into Dutch, French, Italian, and Spanish. He is a founding board member of the National Qigong Association, as well as a past president. He has taught Qigong and Daoist meditation for 28 years and leads yearly tours to visit the Daoist temples in the sacred mountains of China. Welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
What an honor it is to have you on the show and to be in this sacred space together today.
Mm-hmm. What I like to call cyber Dao.
Yeah, that's so cool. I love that, cyber Dao. So I'm a little bit starstruck. I mentioned this before we started the recording because I've taken your classes and I've read some of your books, and I'm just fascinated and truly honored that you would want to be part of this podcast.
Yeah, as I mentioned, it's just an opportunity for me to make a new friend and to talk about something that I'm passionate about.
All right. Well, let's get right into it. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us about your own sacred healing journey?
Well, I've been interested in Eastern philosophy, Eastern practices since I was a teenager back in the 60s, and studied mostly Buddhism back then, because where I grew up, at the time I was living in Boston, and there really wasn't any Daoist teachers or Daoism going on. So did a lot of yoga, meditation, and music. And at one point in my later life, I became sick with chronic fatigue syndrome. And I was sick for about 12 years till I was totally bedridden and had 3 children and a business, and it was pretty awful time. And it was long enough ago, this was like 28 years ago, that doctors were very skeptical that it even existed. And, you know, it was a really difficult time. And there's no Western medicine, there's no cure, there's no treatment even. And so Chinese herbs is what got me out of bed, and then Qigong is what cured me out of an incurable disease. So I have a big believer in the power of Qigong and Chinese medicine. And then as I was getting better, I was studying Zen, sitting Zen Buddhism at the time. I thought I wanted to learn more about what was the philosophy behind Chinese medicine. And then I started doing some research and discovered Daoism, and it felt like coming home. It was such a wonderful feeling. And so I've been practicing Daoist practices and philosophy ever since. It was 28 years ago.
Wow. Whew, what a powerful experience of your internal healing. Yeah. So as you've kind of journeyed through the last 28 years, what have you learned about the Tao?
It's a vast subject, and what's beautiful about it is that there are so many different aspects to the Daoist world of, you know, Qigong and Tai Chi and Chinese medicine, but it also includes things that like art and painting and writing and music. And one thing that I really love is the Gong Fu tea ceremony, which is a way of offering tea, of preparing and sharing tea in the present moment that is really a kind of meditation. So I've gone pretty deeply into that. And I actually have a book called Cha Dao, The Way of Tea. Tea is a Way of Life, that was published a few years ago by a company in England called Singing Dragon. So when I teach Qigong all over the country, and whenever I do, I also do tea ceremony as part of the class, and it really, people love it, and it just opens them up to go into deeper levels of the Qigong and the meditation.
Wow. So this is the healing modality, the herbs that, started to really facilitate a healing response within your body. And then
Hmm.
Qigong, moving the energy within your body, is what changed the energy, transformed the energy, right? So
Yes, and
now,
access the healing energy that surrounds us at all times. We live
yes.
in a sea of chi, like fish live in an ocean. But the
Hmm.
chi in our body, sometimes it gets weakened or blocked, or it leaks out, and so we need to find a way to access that cosmic chi that we live in, to
Hmm.
bring that into our body, and then circulate that in our body, and then store some of it in our body.
Yes. So now you've found this way to use this practice within your own journey, but also to share that journey through teaching Qigong, writing books, teaching and sharing tea ceremonies around the world, right?
Well, all around the U.S., and then I go to China. I take a group to China every year. So we do our Qigong up in the sacred mountains in China, and we study with people there. And then we
Mm,
just, there's a saying in Zen, it's called locking eyebrows with the masters, which
mm,
is something like when you go to a sacred space, and that can be anywhere in the world. It can be, in New Hampshire, in Colorado, is China, Tibet. Then it's a place where people have done ceremony or ritual or practices for hundreds, if not thousands of years. You, you really pick up on that, and it really helps you bring your practice up another level.
yeah.
Anyone who's been to a sacred space, you can feel that, whether it's Native American people or African people or Chinese people, you're able to tap into that, and so it's a
Yes.
wonderful feeling.
So how did you go from the process of doing this inner work to really sharing this work outwardly?
Well, when I was a kid, I just wanted to grow up and be a writer. That's what I wanted to do,
Mm,
and I haven't gone to college. I was going to acupuncture school when I got sick, till I finally had to drop out of acupuncture school after a year and a half. But even
wow.
in that year and a half, you've studied Chinese medicine. Even those beginning classes of just learning how to look at the body and the world in a totally different way,
Yes.
really supports to teach. I think everyone who teaches qigong should study some Chinese medicine, because
Mm,
it really helps you to understand what qigong really is, and to explain it to others.
yeah. Wow. So what was that like, again, that sort of transitionary time to take the work from the internal and branch it out to the external and still be in such an internal place? Was there like a switch that clicked off that said, "Hey, I think I want to share this," after you started to get better?
Yeah,
Or
I think anyone who studies something and gets really excited about it, it's really a joy to share it with others. So I
yes.
wrote my first book, Embarking on the Way, bringing a Western Daoist book, and also I did a book called um, Gathering of Cranes, Bringing Dao to the West, which is interviews with 9 different Chinese teachers who have all moved to the West, like
Yes.
Mantak Chia and Hua Qingmi and Deng Ming Dao and Yang Jingmei people, so that I could talk to them about what is it. So what is it like teaching Westerners these traditions, and how has it altered or
Mm,
changed the way you teach, and what do you think Westerners can really use and apply and understand about these practices?
mm-hmm. I
Because
believe
my
this.
job, I'm not a Chinese person. I'm not trying to be a Chinese person. I'm a Sinopath, which means someone who's really, really fascinated about Chinese culture and history and food and all of it. But I think it's very important that we take these ancient practices and bring them into the new age and
Yeah,
to the modern age, and people in the West, so that they can understand them and use them. Because
absolutely.
that's what's important. That book you mentioned, Practicing the Daodejing, 81 Steps on the Way, is my version, my Taoist version of Daodejing. And then I wrote a practice for every chapter. Just a
Oh,
simple Qigong practice, meditation practice, lifestyle practice, so that you're not just sitting and reading a book. You read the chapter that Lao Tzu wrote, you read my commentary explaining it, and then you do a practice. that is connected to that chapter, so that it really becomes much more useful that way.
Yeah, so the integration is possible because of that sort of intellectual stimulation, the spiritual stimulation, then of course the physical as well.
Yeah, well, Lao Tzu talks a lot about the difference between head knowledge and belly knowledge.
Yeah.
Like intellectual knowledge and knowledge that you really feel it in your belly, in your body, in your dantian.
Yeah. Wow. So I just got taken back, and I realized the very first book that I read that was yours without knowing it was back when I was in massage school, and it was the collection of interviews that you did.
Yeah, that's the Gathering of Cranes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I remembered the title as well. It was very clear. So writing is a way for you to share what's in your heart, what's in your knowing, what's in your knowledge base that lives within the dantians, right?
Yeah, and what's my passion? Lao Tzu says every day in the so-called real world, we pack more information, and we live in the information age, and we pack more information. But in the way of Tao, every day we let something go.
And this is vital. This is really vital. In the way of Tao, every day we let something go.
Yeah. Yes, and we're more concerned with belly knowledge than head knowledge, intellectual knowledge. And that's another reason I wrote the book the way I did, so that people didn't just, because the thing is, you can't really understand or approach or work with Daoism just from an intellectual viewpoint. You won't ever really understand it unless you do the practices and bring it into your body.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a fairly key facet that most of the teachers of Daoism and Chinese medicine talk about, is that it can't be just intellectual. Mm-hmm. It has to go deeper.
Lao Tzu says, put an end to learning. The direct quote is, give up learning and put an end to your troubles. Give up intellectual learning and put an end to your troubles.
So let's dive in. The difference between head knowledge and belly knowledge. Let's talk about it for our listeners that might have no idea what Daoism is or what we're talking about so far. I'm in complete fascination mode here, but let's take a few steps back. Yeah. So first off, what is Daoism?
Daoism is a path, a philosophy, a set of practices, really a way of looking at the world and really experiencing ourselves in connection with nature, with the great nature, and with also nature within us. And it comes, like a lot of world religions, from ancient shamanism. So the shamans were the people who were connecting and communicating with the spirit world, right? And the nature spirits, the spirits of the trees, the spirits of the animals. Chuang, who is the most important of the ancient Daoists after Lao Tzu wrote the Daodejing, says at one time people were able to speak to animals and communicate in a language that they both understood. People could speak to trees, to the spirits of nature, in a real language that both understood. And then people started differentiating. He started giving names, like, you are a tree, I am a human. You're an animal, I'm a human. I'm the highest form of life. And then because of that, he says Tao was lost, or we lost that ability to communicate with the natural world around us. And a lot of cultures talk about this, right? In ancient times, people spoke to animals, they spoke to trees. They really, not in a fanciful way, but an actual communication. And then people started making differentiation. I am a human, you are not. And, then we lost something very, very precious. And so Taoists are about trying to recover that. How to recover a way to communicate with the nature, the natural world, and the world around us in a very real way, because there's so much that we can learn.
Yes.
Even Chinese medicine, that they would start looking at how do animals, what plants do they go and eat when they get injured or when they get sick? and then they would go and try those plants.
Yes.
When you see animals, they curl up in a circle, a lot of animals, when they're going to sleep, and they close off energy leakages in their body. Well, why don't we try that too? You know, they learned a lot just from the natural world around them.
Yeah. It's really interesting to think about nature and experience different aspects of nature. As you mentioned this, of course, I have 2 cats and they have no hair,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so they sleep in that curled up position all the time. And I've always thought there's something more to that. But now as I see it, and they always put their little paws over their faces. So they're curled completely in. All of their orifices are protected. And their Daodejings are sort of all rolled up into each other.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Wow.
Sometimes birds will stand on one leg and close their anal opening with the other leg, so that they don't leak chi.
Yes. Yes.
And then as they got more sensitive, in deep meditation, the Taoists were able to track where in the body, say the energy of the liver, where does that start, and how does that move through our body? Mm-hmm. They tracked it all the way down to our big toe, and then tracked it up the leg, and then just did this sort of like inner astronaut kind of exploration. Yeah. So that now we have this beautiful Chinese medicine, and sometimes it seems odd where they choose to needle you. You say you're having a problem in your stomach. They don't necessarily needle your stomach. They're needling somewhere else where the energy flows in and out of that organ. Right.
Yeah. It's a really fascinating essence and a really fascinating medicine. So, if we go back to nature and we talk about nature for a bit, this is, I think, the essence of the lessons in discerning what is belly knowledge versus what is head knowledge, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, now we know, even in the West, we know that we have another brain in our gut.
Yes.
Right? We have brain cells in our gut.
Yes. Yeah. There's that fantastic book. I think it's called The Second Brain or something.
Full of them like that. Yeah.
So it's quite fascinating. So why don't you go ahead and define a little greater belly knowledge versus head knowledge?
Well, intellectual knowledge can be useful. It's good to know things, to learn things. If you want to know where the points are in the body, you want to understand how the energetic body works, but that can only take you so far. In the old days, they would talk about trusting your gut feelings, which we think now, trusting your gut, what does that mean? It doesn't make any sense in the modern Western ideas. But as we know, we have brain cells in our gut. And also it's not just, in Daoism and Chinese medicine, we have 3 main, what you might think of as chakras, energy points in the body. We call dantians, which means field of energy or field of medicine. Mm-hmm. And the first one is in our lower abdomen. Mm-hmm. So that's a foundation. Whenever you practice Qigong, even Tai Chi, they talk a lot about all your movements should be done from there. Mm. And when I teach Qigong, the first thing I teach is rooting and grounding, because most people are just sort of floating above the earth. They're not really connected to the earth.
Right.
So how do we do that? We send roots in our mind. We send roots from the bottom of our feet down and way down into the earth, at least 3 times the length of your body, so that you can really feel connected to the earth. So you can bring yin energy from the earth up into your body. Mm. So these Qigong practices may sound a little fanciful if you don't know about them, but they're really very useful. Yes. So that when the winds, the trees, you look at a tree and people say, picture a tree. And people picture this big trunk and limbs and leaves and flowers and fruit. But actually the root system goes way, way down, sometimes even longer than the part of the tree we can see.
Absolutely.
And just like trees, if they didn't have that strong root system, when the wind comes up, they would just topple over. And for many people are not grounded and rooted, when the winds of fate or challenges in their life come along, it just knocks them over.
Right.
So it's really important to have that grounded, rooted experience and have it in your life so that you can rise up to challenges rather than just get knocked down by them.
I love that.
So it's very practical. I mean, it's very practical. It's not just, cosmic, fanciful ideas, but very, very practical things.
Right. And things that were really just based upon coping and living in the capacities of nature, which so much of was necessary before we lived in a modern world like we do today.
Yeah. We live in a very...
Go ahead.
Oh, I'd say we live in a very different world than the people in Han Dynasty 2,000 years ago. But a lot of the same issues are still, getting sick, having good relations, having a comfortable lifestyle,
Yes.
being able to travel. These kinds of things are still the same. Yes. We want to be happy. We want to be loved. We want to be healthy. All the same things that people were interested in 2,000 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the virtues, so to speak, haven't changed that much. Perhaps how we experience them has, but the desires, I think, are rooted very similarly.
Sure.
Yeah. So would you like to talk about the other two Dantians, since we started with the lower Dantian?
Yeah, the lower Dantian, excuse me. Sorry. Yes, the lower Dantian is the foundation. So when we do Qigong, when you're first learning Qigong, besides the rooting, we work a lot with the lower Dantian because it's like building a house from the ground up. And the middle Dantian is the heart center.
Yes. Between
the two nipples. And it is believed that the heart center is where we store our spiritual energy called the Shen, S-H-E-N. Also connects to the brain, the mind, cognitive mind. Those old sayings of learning something by heart, following your heart, all those kinds of things. And the heart is said to be the ruler of all the other organs. And then the upper Dantian is with the third eye level. It's like between the on the forehead, between the eyebrows, and then inside the brain is the upper Dantian. And so people, all those different Dantians, we do different practices in our meditation, our energetic meditation practices, to really strengthen and light those centers up and allow them to communicate with each other.
Yeah. So people very often, you've sort of alluded to this a bit, people very often do sort of liken, because they've heard about chakras, they do sort of liken Dantians in a way to chakras. So if it's easy for people to think about it in that sense, that's a great sort of beginning step. The Dantians, from what I know, and you can elaborate on this, they connect us also outwardly, right? They connect us to the earth, to the heavens, and to humanity.
Yeah, well, the Chinese believe that humans are this heaven, human, earth, and that the humans are sort of a fulcrum between heaven and earth. And our job is to manifest earthly energy and heavenly energy in our own being. And, in China nowadays, there are two forms of Daoism called Daojia and Daozhou. And Daojia is more sometimes called philosophical or classical Daoism, Daodejing, Zhuangzi, Qigong meditation. And Daozhou is more the religious form, where they have celibate nuns and monks and do a lot of ritual and that kind of thing. And for most people, especially in the West, people aren't as interested in the religious form of Daoism. That are more interested in the philosophical or practical Daoism, the ancient Daoism. Yeah. I mean, there's a great beauty in the religious form of Daoism also. The rituals are very beautiful, and but it's a kind of Daoism that was influenced a lot by Buddhism also. Because in ancient times, like Daodejing times, there was nothing called Daoism. Lao Tzu was not a Daoist, like Jesus was not a Christian, and certainly not a Catholic, like the way I was taught and when I was a kid in New Hampshire. But there was nothing called Daoism. There was no need for a Daoism. It was just a way of life, a way of experiencing the world. It wasn't until 1,000 years later that Daoism became more organized into a religion.
Yeah.
And people in the West, especially who are drawn to Daoism, I have found over the years that they tend to be highly individuated, non-joiner types. So we're not, Taoists are not well organized like the Buddhists. You know, there are no centers where you can go and stay and learn and work in the garden and learn Taoist practices. Yeah. I do have a friend who's an ordained Taoist priest and Qigong master, and he is actually building a center right now as we speak in Tennessee.
Oh, wow.
So that will be available where they'll have places for people to stay and while they're studying, and it's out in the country. It'll be very beautiful because there really isn't anything like that for Taoists.
Yeah, there's this quote about the Tao, which I think it's something like, the Tao which can be spoken is not the eternal Tao, right?
Yes, that's the first line of the Daodejing. I love that. The first line of the whole book is to try to put, you know, the immensity of the universe, of the creation, into a little box and define it and say what it is and isn't is futile.
Yes. So while we talk about it and try to get the essence of it within our gut, within our heart, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It comes down to there's so much more. And that's the thing that's most fascinating about this work, I think, is that the depth just keeps going.
Yeah. That's why 28 years later, I still feel like a beginner. The more I learn, there's more to learn. and I call myself a scholar with a small s. So I read a lot of scholarly works on Daoism, which are fascinating. But what I feel is most important is to be able to share it with people in a very practical, down-to-earth way, so people can really benefit from it.
Yes. Yes.
And we make it just like Buddhism came to the West and is really evolved into a very unique form of Western Buddhism that's very practical and useful for the Western world. Daoism is still very new to the West.
Yes.
It's only like one generation. I mean, my teacher, Ching, he's 101 right now, and he's been teaching here for quite a while. But the generation before that, there weren't any Daoist teachers in the West.
You had to go to
I have a friend named Chuang Huang, who's a very well-known Tai Chi teacher. And he came here in the 60s and worked with Alan Watts and Joseph Campbell. And he's either 81 or 82. And I'll be seeing him next month. And he teaches classes with 100 people in it. And he's up there dancing and telling stories and reciting poetry and he'll have a huge piece of paper and he'll draw a Chinese character on it. And then he teaches us how to dance that character. So really bring it into our body. Not just memorize the character, but how do you dance that character? How do you move your body in the same waves and ways of that character?
Yeah. Oof,
yeah, he's a big inspiration for me.
You know, so I already told you, I laid some of my cards on the table before we started, but I have this fascination with the Chinese characters lately and how the Chinese characters are so challenging to put words to because those pictograms say so much. And I would just love, from your perspective, I would love to hear about, you know, what the characters mean to you, if there's a specific character, if there's an example you want to share, just anything. Yeah.
Well, I don't know how much you know, but if you've ever seen the ancient Chinese characters, which look very different than the ones that we use now.
Yes.
They're much more pictographic. You know, the moon looks like a moon. You know, that even the term Ren, which means person, is just like a little stick figure. Even now, it's just like a little line with 2 feet.
Yes.
And the character Dao, which people think of, well, Dao is like the source with a capital S, but it also means someone who follows the Dao. It means a pathway to Dao, and it means the person who is walking on that path.
Mm.
And so it's very difficult, because when people started, the Westerners didn't want to learn thousands of characters, so they wanted to find out a way that we could put it in Western letters. So they came up with a system called the Wade-Giles system, which is really goofy, because things like Daoism is spelled with a T. And so someone who didn't know better, they would look at that and, of course, pronounce it as Taoism.
Right.
You know, and Tai Chi, which is Tai Chi Chuan, the thing that people do, is actually the word CHI is supposed to be pronounced as JI.
Yes. Tai
Chi. But who would know that? So most people in the West, even people who teach Tai Chi, they call it Tai Chi. But the word Chi it's different than the word Qi for like Qigong or Chinese medicine. Tai Chi means great ultimate. So it's very confusing for people to understand. And nowadays they have a new system called Pinyin, in which Daoism is spelled with a D, Tai Chi is spelled with a J, but it's got some problems also. You know, the life force, they spell QI. Yes. So people who didn't know would say it would be Qui or something. You know, so it's very difficult when you want to learn these terms and this language.
Yeah. It's very interesting to sort of dive into, and also to really think about culturally how old China is and how young America is, right?
We're hundreds of years old. They're thousands of years old. Yes.
Exactly. And so how much time they've had to thoughtfully develop this language, which language isn't even the optimal word for it, but this sort of way of communicating that involves their words and involves these pictograms and involves the essence is just, it's fascinating. And it evolved at a very, very different time than our language evolved.
Yes. Well, you know, one thing that's really interesting is the Daodejing was written by a character named Lao Tzu. Lao Tzu is not his name. He wasn't like Mr. Tzu. Lao Tzu is a title, and what it means is old master. Yes. But the character Tzu is like a 3 with a line through it. It can also mean child. So the term for master, when you say someone's a master, like Zhuangzi or Master Zhuang, the character, sometimes you'll see Lao Tzu translated as the old boy or the old child.
Right.
So I love that. It's like becoming a child, you know, to enter the kingdom, and, you know, the things that even Jesus spoke about. And that idea of having a childlike sense of wonder, that not being childish, but childlike.
Yes.
That's a big thing in Daoism. It's about being flexible. It's about being moving slowly. It's about processing slowly. You know, because there's some of these principles. And the other really important and I think fascinating principle of Daoism, maybe even the most important principle, is called Wu Wei, which is spelled W-U-W-E-I, which of course looks like Wu Wei, but you don't pronounce the W, so there's still problems with the language. But Wu Wei means, if you translate it directly, it means not doing. But what it actually means is not overdoing, not overextending, not going against the natural flow of the nature around us and also the nature within us, and not forcing. You know, just that alone, is a thing that you could spend the rest of your life learning and applying to your life. I think
there's so much richness and so much robustness in this conversation that we're getting into today.
Yeah. Well, and it's just a way to really apply these principles to your life. Being flexible in your body. You know, I'm 68, and when I was a kid, people 68 were like old people who didn't do anything. You know, and so to keep flexible in your body, doing yoga. We have a kind of yoga we do called Daoism, And I also do some hatha yoga and then Qigong and Tai Chi so that your body stays flexible. But also, it's very important that your mind stay flexible. Because a lot of people, the older they get, their mind starts ossifying and shutting down, and they're not interested in new experiences and new people and new foods, and they just want to do what they know and what they're comfortable with. And then, Lao Tzu talks about the young plant. When the plant is young, it's very bendy and flexible, and the plant gets older, it becomes dry and brittle, and then it breaks. So that idea that we keep ourselves in that childlike state and also that flexible young state, so that we're flexible in our body, our minds, and our spirits.
So what do you see when you're teaching, when you're sharing, when you're facilitating? What do you see as changes in the clients?
When you started, like when I first started studying Tai Chi, there were 40 people in the class. And by the time we got to the second level, there were 8 of us. Because most people who just start to study Tai Chi, especially Tai Chi, people don't understand that it takes years to learn a Qigong form. It takes months and months to learn the form, and then it takes years to really perfect it and really let it really be part of our life, of our being. And Qigong is the same way. Qigong's a little easier to learn, actually. And in a weekend, you can actually learn a Qigong form. But I have found something kind of odd, which is the people that are the most enthusiastic in the class, like, oh my God, I love this. I can't believe I'm finally getting to learn this. I've wanted to learn this for years. This is great. And then when I check in with them 3 or 4 or 6 months later, they've dropped it. And so the key is to learn the practices, but to keep doing them. And in the beginning, you learn a set of movements from a teacher, but then after you've done it for a while, the practice itself becomes your teacher. I practice and teach a Qigong form called Wuji, or Primordial Qigong. And it's a very ancient Qigong. It comes from a master, Johnson Feng, like 800 years ago. So it has this ancient Daoist cosmological feeling. And I've been doing it now for about 25 years. And I've done it thousands of times, and I never get tired of it. And every 3 or 4 years, I'd learn something new about it. As I'm moving through the form, what if I find I'm just like raising my elbow a little differently, or I'm turning a little differently. And I go, oh, that really changes things. That's nice. And that keeps happening to me over the many years. And the idea with Qigong is that you become healthier, but you also become, I tell people, you'll become smarter, because your mind functions will start working better. And your energetic states, your emotional states will come more into balance. So it's not just a matter of having more energy. It's a matter of being able to process the world in a different way.
Right.
And not everybody realizes that that's the kind of thing that's going to be happening with them when they start practicing. And if they stick with it, that's the key. Anyone can go to a class and learn a set of movements, but you need to keep with it and learn how to apply it to the rest of your life.
Do you think that it's possible that sometimes people stop because they're not ready to go to those depths within themselves?
That's a good point. That could be true, yes. But I think people in the West, a lot of people in the West tend to want instant gratification and they want things to come really quickly. And these practices of Chinese medicine, of meditation, of Qigong, it comes from this tradition called Yang, which means nourishing life practices. So it's a way to nourish yourself. The food that you eat, you're not eating fast food, or you're not eating, there's all kinds of ideas of only eating to your 80% full instead of 100%, and eating fresh vegetables and good food that's going to give you good chi. It touches every part of your being, your relationships with your partner, your friends, your coworkers.
Yes.
that's important also. And that's why the tea ceremony, I love the tea ceremony so much, because it's a way for us to connect with the plant medicine, which people have been doing for thousands of years. And people, they find paintings, rock in caves and things, 3,000 years old, of people sharing tea, of making offerings to the tea gods. This has been going on for a long time, and this is a way to also tap into that thing that people have been doing for thousands of years.
Right.
And it's very, very simple. We just take dried leaves and pour hot water over them. But we do a little bit of ritual. We drink out of tiny little cups. We're using tiny little teapots. I don't know if you're familiar with Kung Fu tea style. And we use it very
familiar, and I'm so fascinated and curious.
Yeah, it is. It is fascinating. And I've done tea ceremonies for up to 50 people. It's better to do it with fewer people, of course, but it's a way of, we take this dried plant material, and a lot of times I use this tea called pu'er tea, and it's dried into these cakes. So it's like hard cakes, and you have to use a tool to break open the cakes. And then you take that dried up old looking leaves, you put it in water in a cup, and you pour the hot water, and then the leaves start opening, and then the life comes back into the leaves. And then when we drink that in a very conscious meditative way, then that awakens something within us.
Wow. This makes me
if people want to learn more about tea, I have the book Cha Dao. There's also, I have some friends, you can go to a website called globalteahut.org. And I have some friends in Taiwan who have a tea ashram, and it's an American guy who's a Zen priest, married to a Taiwanese woman, and you go there and you can stay there and eat vegetarian food, do Zen meditation, do lots of tea ceremony, and it's all free. It's all by donation.
Wow.
And they have a lot of videos and things that you can learn more about tea if you just go on their website. And they publish a beautiful magazine, and you can see all the back issues for free on their website. So that's a great source if people want to learn more about the spiritual and cultural aspects of tea.
Right. It makes me think the idea of the tea ceremony is something that's really fascinating and very ritualistic. But it also makes me think something as simple as drinking tea, which of course I do every day in a ceremonial sense. It could be applied to anything, right? Could be applied to anything that we do in any part of our day. So the awakening that you speak of that happens as we sit consciously with the tea, sipping the tea, watching it come back to life, can be occurring in every single aspect of our day.
And you can drink coffee if you're a coffee drinker, but drinking it in a mindful way. And not just gulping it down and running off to the next thing, which is how a lot of people drink coffee or even tea.
Yeah.
So doing it with a little bit of mindfulness. We do a little bit of ritual when we first start, which is really fun. And we connect our chi body to it. We connect our spirit body to it. We do a few little things like that. And it just brings people into a really meditative, open state. And then I often share poetry or stories, sometimes music with the people. I do a lot of work with Tibetan bowls. So sometimes I'm doing a full moon tea ceremony on this Sunday.
Beautiful.
And I have a whole set of, and I have a little temple behind my house, and I have a whole set of big Tibetan bowls that are all mic'd so that they really resonate. So we'll do the tea, share some poetry, and then I'll play the bowls. And, it's a really lovely experience.
Oh, wonderful. Wow. So it's pretty clear that you live the medicine that you practice. Just the way that you speak, it's quite obvious that the essence of the medicine is just within you, and that's what you share, and that's what you live, right?
Yeah. And I'm fortunate that I'm, what Joseph Campbell called following my bliss, that I get to make a living at what I love, what I'm passionate about.
Yeah.
I live in a place where it's very inexpensive to live, but it's, I get to share Qigong and Daoism and tea all over, and I take people to China, and we do things like we go to the Wudang Mountains, which is a sacred Daoist mountain, and we go up behind the big temple, and we visit this friend of mine named Jaya, which means old grandfather, and he's an old hermit who lives in a cave up there.
Whoa.
And he's just the friendliest, loveliest person who just lives up in that cave. And when I first met him, I was so impressed that he laughed at everything anybody said, which I always take to mean that this is really a high level person, a person who laughs at everything. So if people go to my YouTube channel or YouTube page under my name, Solala Towler, I have some video from China, and I have a video interview with him with a translator, because he doesn't speak any English. Okay. And he says some very beautiful things in this interview that I think people would enjoy.
Oh, you are a wealth of resources, as well as, that real good belly knowledge, that stuff that just resonates like so deep and so far beyond this physical conversation that you're having. But the resources are really nice, and I appreciate you sharing those today.
Well, also my website, which is abode, like home, Dao with a T, abodedao.com. I have other videos on there. I have articles you can download for free. I have guided meditations, some of my Tibetan bowl music. There's a whole world there if people want to learn more about Daoism. You can go to www.abodedao.com.
Beautiful. And are your books available? Because there are some.
Yeah, they're all on the website. I have a store there. I'm just starting a tea business. I'm just starting to carry some really good quality pu'er teas there that people can order. I'm just finishing that up today, as a matter of fact, getting everything up there.
Oh, that's wonderful. Wow.
And I published the magazine, The Empty Vessel, for 25 years, and I just passed it on to some other folks. I felt like after 25 years, I was ready to move on to more book projects and music projects that I want to do.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. So I guess I want to end today with kind of an open-ended question, and less of a question, more of just an ask. Is there anything that you really feel called to share from, your medicine, from Daoism, from your lessons, from the Tao, anything that just really sort of brings home what we've chatted about today?
Big question there. Well, I think what's beautiful about Tao practices, Tao philosophy, is they may have originated in China, but they're really there for everyone. Anyone can tap into these. Whether it's Chinese medicine, a very different way of looking at the world, of looking at emotions as energetic states instead of just psychological states, of learning Tai Chi or Qigong meditation. These things are available now. We live in ancient times. You would have to climb a different mountain to study with a teacher. Then you'd have to climb a different mountain to study with another teacher. Now there are so many books and videos and magazines and things that are so available to us. We are so blessed in that way that we can learn. It's better to learn from a teacher in person, but if that's not possible, you're living in a part of the country where there are no teachers available, or you can't afford to go to San Francisco to learn from someone. There are all kinds of online courses. There are videos. I have a course with 4.5 hours of audio and 2.5 hours of video. That's all on my website. But anyone can tap into this. And then the most important thing is to really apply it to your life. Your emotional life, your sexual life, your intellectual life, your physical life. And we're very blessed to be able to have all these things so available to us. So why not look into it?
Yeah.
And also the beauty is you don't have to become a Daoist to use these practices and principles. You can be Jewish, you can be, whatever you were born into that you like. You can still use these practices without signing up to become a Daoist.
Right.
The term they use in China sometimes is Daoyo, which means friend of the Tao.
Wow.
So that's we can all become friends of the Tao, no matter where we live, no matter what our emotion, what our physical state. Even if we're not able to even get up and around, you can still do these practices and apply these principles and philosophy to your life.
Yeah, there's I believe another bit that lends itself to the idea of doing without doing, right? So
That's that wu-wei.
Yeah, so the idea that we don't have to put so much force into life, right? The idea that we can spend some time just being, and that's enough.
Yeah, and sometimes the best thing to do is to do nothing.
Yeah.
And people sometimes come up against problems in their life and they get really frustrated and they want to just crash through these obstacles. Yeah. And they end up expending way more energy than they would if they just stopped and just allowed themselves to be still for a while, still like a mountain. And then eventually the obstacle will either dissolve on its own, or you will then have enough energy to go over the obstacle or around the obstacle. But the more you try to crash through it, the more energy you'll expend uselessly.
Yes. Oh my gosh, what a profound way to say that. Yeah, being still like long enough to let it dissolve or to go over that obstacle. That is so important and so much what we just all as Westerners and so many other places in the world, but it's what we need. Yeah. Well, oh my gosh, Solala, this has been such a great honor and such a great pleasure. I feel that my mind, my whole being really just feels expanded by our conversation and by what you shared. And I know that the essence of this just goes so much deeper and really will touch people that listen, and perhaps lives of those who know people that have listened in a profound way. And that's, of course, the effect that we're going for on the podcast here, is just, raising that vibration and allowing ourselves to settle in.
Yeah, well, it's been lovely. You're a lovely person, and it's been really lovely spending this time with you.
Oh, thank you.
And I hope sometime we get to meet in person.
Absolutely.